President William Ruto of Kenya did not hide his feelings. He spoke with a strong and serious voice about Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB. Ruto called on Nigeria's President, Bola Tinubu, to take action without delay. His message was sharp and direct. He said that Nigeria cannot continue to hold Nnamdi Kanu, because keeping him in prison is wrong, unfair, and against justice. Ruto said clearly, "Release Nnamdi Kanu now. If you do not, Nigeria will face the consequences." These were not light words. These were words of warning and command. He wanted the whole world to hear that Kenya would not stand by in silence while injustice was being done to someone who was unlawfully taken from their land. The Kenyan president reminded Tinubu that Nnamdi Kanu's case had already been looked into by the High Court in Kenya. That court had said that Kanu's transfer in 2021 from Nairobi to Abuja was illegal. It was done in the dark, without following the law, and it violated Kanu's basic human rights. Ruto said that no leader who believes in justice should ignore such a ruling. For him, it was not just a Nigerian matter, it was also about respect for law, respect for rights, and respect for humanity. Ruto explained that when a person is seized and moved across borders in secret, without proper process, it sets a dangerous example. It shows that governments can break their own rules when they want to, and this is something no free society can accept. He said the world cannot move forward if leaders pick and choose when to follow the law. If the law says something is wrong, then it is wrong. And in this case, the law was already clear. Kanu's transfer from Kenya to Nigeria was unlawful. The President of Kenya also spoke about the danger of ignoring court rulings. He said that when leaders turn away from justice, they open the door to chaos. People lose trust in the government. Citizens start to believe that the courts do not matter, and that the voices of the people do not count. Ruto said this cannot be allowed in Africa, a continent that has suffered too much already from unfair rule and broken promises. He told Tinubu that Nigeria has a duty, not only to its people but also to the whole African continent, to respect justice and human rights. Nigeria is one of the biggest countries in Africa. It has power, influence, and a strong voice in the world. But Ruto warned that power must be used with fairness. He said, if Nigeria, with all its size and influence, refuses to obey the law and respect justice, then what example does that set for smaller nations? Ruto's words carried a tone of warning. He said Nigeria would face the consequences if it refused to release Nnamdi Kanu. He did not say this lightly. He meant that Kenya and other nations will not keep quiet. They will raise their voices, and they will not let Nigeria forget that it has broken the law. He also spoke about Nnamdi Kanu as a human being. He reminded Tinubu that beyond politics, Kanu is a man with rights, with a family, with a voice. No government has the right to silence a man forever. Ruto said that locking Kanu away without fair treatment is a shame to justice, and it is a wound to democracy. The president said Africa must rise above such behavior. He said the new generation of leaders must prove that they are different from the old ones who ruled with fear and ignored the voices of their people. He said, we cannot go back to the dark days. We cannot accept secret abductions, unlawful transfers, and endless detentions. This is not leadership. This is not justice. Ruto also reminded Tinubu that leadership is not about force, but about fairness. He said the real strength of a leader is shown when he respects the law even when it is not convenient. He said that releasing Nnamdi Kanu would not make Nigeria weaker, but stronger. It would show the world that Nigeria respects the rule of law, that Nigeria listens to its courts, and that Nigeria cares about justice. Ruto ended his message with a clear demand: Nnamdi Kanu must be released. He said there was no more room for delay, no more time for excuses, no more space for silence. The Kenyan president told Tinubu to act now, to do the right thing, and to free Kanu before the matter grows worse. His words were steady, his tone was firm, and his meaning was direct. William Ruto made it known that Kenya would not accept injustice against Nnamdi Kanu. He stood not only for Kanu, but for the law, for human rights, and for Africa's future. And his call to Tinubu was loud enough for the whole world to hear: release Nnamdi Kanu now, or Nigeria will face the consequences. The case of Nnamdi Kanu did not begin with politics or speeches. It began with the law. And the law in Kenya spoke clearly. In 2021, when Nnamdi Kanu was taken from Nairobi and brought into Nigeria, the way it was done was against every rule of justice. The High Court in Kenya reviewed the matter and gave a strong ruling. The judges declared that the transfer was unlawful, unconstitutional, and a violation of Nnamdi Kanu's fundamental rights. This was not a weak decision. It was a firm judgment, written with clarity so that no one could misunderstand it. The court explained that every person, no matter who they are, has rights that must be respected. These rights include the right to due process, the right to freedom from illegal arrest, and the right to be treated fairly under the law. Nnamdi Kanu, like every other human being, was entitled to these protections. Yet, in June 2021, these protections were ignored. The High Court found that Kanu was seized in Kenya without a proper warrant, without a fair hearing, and without respect for international law. He was then transferred to Nigeria under conditions that the court described as extraordinary rendition, a practice that is condemned worldwide. Extraordinary rendition means taking someone across borders in secret, outside the law, without giving them a chance to defend themselves in court. The judges said this was not only illegal but also deeply unjust. The ruling made it plain, the government of Kenya was not properly involved, and the process bypassed all lawful procedures. For this reason, the court held that Kanu's rights had been trampled upon. His liberty had been denied in a way that went against the Constitution of Kenya. It was a clear reminder that no government has the right to play above the law. The court's decision also carried a message for the international community. It said that justice cannot be bent to suit the interests of one country over another. Nations must respect each other's sovereignty, but above all, they must respect the rights of human beings. Kenya's judges were not only speaking to Nigeria but to all governments that might be tempted to use illegal means to capture those they see as opponents. They were saying, the rule of law comes first. This ruling placed Nigeria in a very difficult position. With the court declaring that the transfer was unlawful, Nigeria's continued detention of Kanu stood on shaky ground. It meant that the foundation of the case was broken from the beginning. If the transfer itself was illegal, then everything that followed was also tainted by illegality. By holding Kanu, Nigeria was holding a man who had been brought into its territory through unlawful means. The court also underlined the damage such actions cause to justice itself. If governments can break the rules whenever they choose, then the law loses its power. If human rights can be set aside whenever convenient, then no citizen is safe. The Kenyan High Court stressed that this is why such actions cannot be allowed to stand. They create a dangerous precedent that puts everyone at risk. The judges did not stop at declaring the transfer unlawful. They also emphasized that Kanu's fundamental rights had been violated. These rights are not gifts from a government but protections guaranteed by the Constitution. They include the right to personal freedom, the right to a fair trial, and the right to dignity. By seizing Kanu and delivering him across borders in secret, those rights were stripped away. The ruling described this as unconstitutional, meaning it broke the very foundation of Kenya's legal order. For many who followed the case, the judgment was a victory for justice. It proved that the courts in Kenya were ready to defend the law even against powerful forces. It showed that no matter how controversial a person might be, they are still entitled to fair treatment. Nnamdi Kanu may have been seen as a political figure by Nigeria, but in the eyes of the law, he was first and foremost a man with rights. The ruling also placed responsibility on Nigeria. Since Kanu's transfer was illegal, Nigeria had no legal ground to keep him in custody. Any trial that followed would be stained by the unlawful way he had been brought into the country. In the eyes of justice, the right thing to do was simple: release him. But Nigeria did not release him. Instead, he remained in detention. This defiance of the Kenyan court ruling added another layer to the injustice. It showed that Nigeria was willing to ignore not only the rights of one man but also the judgment of another nation's court. This was a matter that touched not just Nnamdi Kanu's life but also the reputation of Nigeria as a country that claims to respect the law. The ruling was also a call to other African leaders. It asked them to think about what kind of future they wanted for the continent. Would Africa be a place where leaders respected the rule of law, or a place where power could overrule justice at any time? The Kenyan judges had made their choice clear: Africa must stand for justice. By declaring the 2021 transfer unlawful and unconstitutional, the court gave Kanu and his supporters a strong ground to demand his release. They could now say with confidence that the law was on their side. They could point to the judgment as proof that Kanu had been wronged. And they could remind Nigeria that continuing to hold him was a violation not just of his rights but of international principles. In the end, the Kenyan High Court ruling became more than just a legal decision. It became a symbol of resistance against injustice. It became a voice saying that Africa must respect its own laws. It became a shield for Nnamdi Kanu and a challenge to Nigeria. And it gave William Ruto, as President of Kenya, the power to call Tinubu to account. After the unlawful transfer and the ruling from the Kenyan High Court, the story of Nnamdi Kanu did not end. It grew even more troubling. In detention in Nigeria, Kanu's health became a matter of great concern. Reports began to spread that his medical condition was worsening and that he needed urgent care outside the prison walls. His lawyers brought the matter before the Nigerian court. They asked for something simple and human, that he be allowed to go to a hospital for treatment. But the Nigerian court refused. The request was denied. The ruling shocked many people who had been following the case. For them, it was not about politics anymore. It was about life and health. It was about a man in custody being denied the basic right to medical care. Even prisoners are allowed access to doctors and hospitals when their lives are at risk. Yet in this case, the court turned its face away. This denial raised many questions. Why was Kanu not allowed proper treatment? Why did the Nigerian authorities choose to keep him locked away even when his health was in danger? Was it fear of what he represented, or was it an attempt to break his spirit? These questions echoed not only in Nigeria but across Africa and in many parts of the world. President William Ruto of Kenya was one of the leaders who found the situation unacceptable. For him, it was no longer only about the unlawful transfer that had already been declared illegal by the Kenyan High Court. It was now about human dignity. It was about the refusal to give medical help to a man who was under state custody. Ruto said that this went against every principle of justice. He reminded Tinubu that justice does not end at the point of arrest. Justice continues in how a person is treated, in how their health is protected, and in how their rights are upheld even when they are behind bars. Ruto's words carried both anger and warning. He said that if Nigeria could not even allow medical care for Nnamdi Kanu, then it was showing the world that it had chosen cruelty over justice. He told Tinubu that the international community was watching. He told him that history was recording every action and every refusal. And history, he warned, would not be kind to leaders who denied a man the right to health. The refusal of medical care also sent a dangerous message to the people. It made citizens believe that the courts could be used not for justice but for punishment. When the court refused to let Kanu go to a hospital, it signaled that the legal system could choose politics over humanity. For many, this was a betrayal of the very idea of law. Because if the courts are not there to protect life and rights, then what purpose do they serve? The decision also deepened the anger of Kanu's supporters. They felt that their leader was being slowly silenced through neglect. To them, denying him hospital treatment was no different from denying him the right to live. It turned his imprisonment into something harsher than a sentence. It turned it into slow suffering. This feeling spread among communities, stirring more frustration, more tension, and more distrust of the Nigerian state. President Ruto spoke to this directly. He said that leaders must remember that power is not about how much you can control, but how much fairness you can show. He said that when you deny a prisoner medical care, you're not only harming the prisoner, you are harming the name of your own country. You are telling the world that you cannot be trusted with justice. Ruto made it clear that this matter was now larger than one man. It was about whether Nigeria wanted to stand as a nation of law or a nation of force. He said that when a leader chooses law, he chooses respect, dignity, and peace. When a leader chooses force, he chooses fear, cruelty, and shame. And in this case, Nigeria had chosen force. That, Ruto warned, would bring consequences. He repeated his demand that Nnamdi Kanu be released. He said that keeping Kanu in prison after the Kenyan High Court had declared the transfer unlawful was already unjust. But refusing him medical care made the injustice even heavier. It crossed a line that no leader should cross. It showed not just disobedience to the law but disregard for life itself. Ruto's call was not just for Tinubu. It was for Africa as a whole. He asked other leaders to look at the situation and speak out. He said Africa cannot be silent when one of its nations holds a man unlawfully and denies him care. He said silence in the face of injustice is also injustice. He reminded them that leadership must always be tied to humanity. In the end, Chapter 3 of this story became a story of resistance against cruelty. The refusal of medical care to Nnamdi Kanu revealed the depth of the injustice against him. It showed how far Nigeria was willing to go to keep him silent. But it also gave William Ruto the ground to make his voice louder. His words were no longer just about law. They were about life. They were about the simple truth that no court, no government, and no leader has the right to deny a man health and dignity. And so, with a voice strong and direct, Ruto told Tinubu once again, do the right thing. Release Nnamdi Kanu now. Justice cannot wait. Humanity cannot wait. The world is watching, and Nigeria must not be found on the wrong side of history.